Mireya, sign the transfer papers or I'll burn down your sanctuary. My father's voice was sharp as a knife, full of greed, as he stood before my house with a can of gasoline in his hand. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a victim. I simply pressed the record button and froze every penny sustaining their world. The digital echo of his rage still vibrated in my palm as I turned my back to the flickering screen, searching for the cold, unforgiving silence of the city. The skyline of Canary Wharf stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass of my office, a jagged horizon of steel and light that mirrored the cold precision of the world I had built for myself. At 30 years old, I stood at the edge of this glass kingdom, holding a weight in my hands that felt far heavier than the silver-plated trophy it actually was. Cybersecurity Specialist of the Year. The engraving caught the blue flicker of the monitors, a silent testament to a decade of sleepless nights, countless lines of code, and a relentless drive to become someone, anyone, other than the girl they had left behind in the dust of a Texas ranch. Success, I had learned, isn't found in the thunder of applause. It is found in the quiet moment when you realize you no longer have to hide your strength to make others feel comfortable. I pressed my forehead against the cool pane, watching the tiny red lights of the London traffic crawl below like a slow-moving digital stream. It took 10 years of grit to reach this height. 10 years of pretending the hollow ache in my chest was just hunger for ambition. There is a weight to greatness that no one warns you about. It is the heavy cloak of responsibility. For too long, I had carried that responsibility for people who refused to walk on their own. My bank account had become a bridge for a family that viewed my survival as their profit margin. I glanced at the corner of my mahogany desk, where a small, silver-framed photograph of my grandmother sat. She was the only one who saw the fire in me before I knew how to light it. "Mireya," she had whispered once, her voice like dry leaves. "Kindness without boundaries is just a slow way to destroy yourself." She was right. I was a specialist in protecting global networks, yet I had left the gates to my own life wide open for the people most likely to pillage it. The silence of the office was shattered by the aggressive vibration of my encrypted phone. The caller ID flashed a Texas area code. My stomach did a slow, familiar somersault. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the glass screen. It was a group video call. Silas and Myra. For a fleeting, desperate second, I let myself hope. Maybe they had seen the industry news. Maybe, for the first time in my life, they were calling to say they were proud. I swiped the screen. The high-definition feed didn't show a celebration. Instead, I was met with the chaotic, golden-lit background of an upscale steakhouse in Austin. The clinking of silverware and the hum of expensive wine-fueled laughter filled my London office. My father, Silas, didn't even acknowledge the trophy sitting prominently on my desk. He didn't ask about the time or the bags under my eyes. He simply adjusted his glasses and leaned into the camera, his face flushed with the kind of entitlement that only grows in the absence of accountability. "Mireya, thank God you picked up," he barked, his voice cutting through the London night. "We're sitting here with the event coordinator for Celine's debutante ball. The menu cost just jumped. We need $20,000 moved into the primary account by Monday morning. We're already over budget on the venue, and your mother insists on the imported orchids." My mother, Myra, drifted into the frame, her smile as practiced as a pageant queen's. "It's going to be the event of the season, honey. Celine only turns 18 once. It's the only thing that really matters for the Reynolds name right now." The air in my lungs felt thin. I looked at the silver trophy, then back at the screen where my parents were already discussing appetizers as if I were nothing more than a remote access ATM. "I'm at a professional gala, Mom," I said, my voice sounding distant even to myself. "I've just received a major industry award. I can't discuss catering invoices right now." Silas's expression soured instantly, his brow furrowing into a mask of irritation. "Don't get high and mighty with us because you're playing with computers in London, Mireya. You have a duty as the youngest to ensure this family keeps it standing. Your sister is the face of this family, and you're the support. That's the way it's always been. Don't let your ego get in the way of your responsibilities." A cold, familiar bitterness rose in my throat. I remembered my own college graduation, the one I paid for by working 3 jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. They hadn't come. They had called an hour before the ceremony to tell me Celine had a hair emergency for a local beauty pageant, and they couldn't possibly make the drive. I had walked across that stage alone, clutching a diploma that felt like a consolation prize for a daughter they never really wanted. "I love you both," I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "And I want Celine to have a wonderful birthday. But my bank account is not a public utility. I am not authorizing a $20,000 transfer for flowers and steak while I'm in the middle of a security crisis here." Myra's face crumpled into a mask of tragic disappointment. "How can you be so cold? We sacrificed everything to give you a foundation. We put a roof over your head for 18 years, and this is how you repay us? By being greedy with your little tech salary?" "I didn't ask to be an investment, Mom," I replied, my grip tightening on the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. "I am a person, and that tech salary has been paying your mortgage and Celine's tuition for 3 years. Silas leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing into slits. The mask of the doting father had slipped completely, revealing the predator beneath. "Listen to me closely, Maria Ann Reynolds. That house in Austin, you might have your name on the deed, but I'm the one who walks those halls. You think that glass tower in London makes you untouchable? You think you can just shut us out?" He let out a low, guttural laugh that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I'll show you what happens to an ungrateful daughter's sanctuary. You have 24 hours to sign the management papers I sent to your email, or you won't have a home to come back to. I'll burn that monument to your arrogance to the ground before I let you lord it over us." The screen went black. Absolute silence enveloped everything, broken only by the distant chime of Big Ben echoing through the London fog. I stared at my reflection on the dark phone screen. Fear had been replaced by an overwhelming clarity. I walked over to my grandmother's picture and turned it face down. I didn't need protection anymore. I needed to be the storm. The blue light from my dual monitors was the only thing illuminating my London office, casting long, skeletal shadows against the glass walls. On the screen, the live 4K feed from my Austin home felt less like a security measure and more like a portal into a nightmare. I sat motionless, my fingers curled tightly around the edge of my mahogany desk, watching the people who shared my blood invade the only sanctuary I had ever built for myself. They entered without a key, Silas having likely bribed a local locksmith or used a hidden spare I'd forgotten to remove. Watching them walk through my front door was a physical violation. A sharp, cold blade sliding between my ribs. It didn't matter that I was thousands of miles away. I could almost feel the floorboards groaning under the weight of their entitlement. My eyes locked onto Celine. She was draped in one of my silk designer robes, twirling a glass of expensive wine she'd surely taken from my private cellar. As she pulled a vintage Chanel dress from my closet, a memory I had buried beneath years of corporate success clawed its way to the surface. I was 17, standing in the kitchen of our old rancher, holding the emerald green prom dress I'd spent 6 months of waitressing tips to buy. I'd hidden it like a treasure. But that afternoon, I found it on Celine. My mother had simply smiled and said, "She just looks better in it, Maria. Besides, you're the smart one. You don't need to be the pretty one, too." They called it sharing. I called it the couture betrayal. It was the moment I understood that my hard work was merely a resource for them to exploit. The scars you cannot see are always the hardest to heal. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath hitching as I watched Silas and Myra prop my front doors wide open. A line of cars began to pull into my driveway. Strangers, complete strangers, started spilling out, clutching handbags and looking around with predatory curiosity. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't a family visit. It was an estate sale. My mother was standing in the foyer, greeting people with that practiced, honey-dipped Texas charm. "Welcome, y'all. Maria wanted us to clear this all out for charity since she's living her big life in Europe," she lied, her voice carrying clearly through the smart home microphones. "Everything must go. We need the space for Celine's debutante preparations." I watched, paralyzed by the sheer audacity, as a woman I didn't know picked up a first-edition Hemingway I'd spent a year tracking down. She turned it over, looking at the price sticker Silas had slapped onto the spine. $5. My life was being liquidated for pennies to fund a party for a girl who had never worked a day in her life. I felt a surge of indignation so hot it made my vision blur. Have you ever stood by and watched people you love treat your life like a communal garden they are entitled to harvest? I didn't want to be the villain. I wanted, just once, to see them choose love over greed. I wanted to believe that somewhere deep inside there was a shred of unshakable integrity. But as I watched Silas hand my college dean's award to a man for $10, that hope turned to ash. I reached for the intercom button on my terminal. My voice, when it came, was a whisper of cold steel. "Mom, put that vase down. It is not yours to sell." The sound echoed through the Austin foyer, amplified by the high-end ceiling speakers. Myra froze for a split second, her eyes darting toward the hidden camera lens in the crown molding. Then, she let out a sharp, mocking scoff. "Go back to your computers, Mireya. A child's wealth belongs to the parents who birthed her. You owe us this. You owe us everything." She turned back to a customer, dismissing me as if I were nothing more than an annoying ghost in the machine. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was a documented crime. I didn't scream or plead. Instead, I began a secondary recording, ensuring the forensic capture protocol was logging every face, every transaction, and every word spoken. Under Texas property law, this was unauthorized entry and felony theft. I was no longer a daughter watching a family squabble. I was a cybersecurity analyst gathering evidence for a grand jury. I watched as Celine strutted back into the frame, now wearing my favorite pair of Italian heels, shoes she could never afford on her own. She laughed, a high, brittle sound that grated on my nerves. "Look at this," she said to Silas, picking up my childhood science fair trophy, the only thing I had left from a time before they completely ignored me. The little servant girl finally bought something useful. She tossed the trophy into a cardboard bin labeled $5 clearance. I closed my eyes for a single, long second. A quote from an old mentor surfaced in my mind. "We cannot control the wind, Mireya, but we can always adjust our sails." My loyalty to these people had become my greatest liability. It was an anchor dragging me into a sea of their making. I opened my eyes and the last flicker of hesitation was gone. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to dismantle the stage they were standing on. I didn't need their permission to exist anymore. With a few decisive keystrokes, I initiated the Sanctuary Protocol. A high-pitched, digital cease and desist alert blared from every smartphone in that house, a legal notice sent via a priority server. Simultaneously, I engaged the high-security deadbolts on my bedroom and office doors. The heavy steel bolts slid into place with a resounding metallic clack that silenced the foyer. Celine, who had been heading toward my master suite to raid my jewelry box, found herself suddenly trapped in the narrow hallway. She hammered on the door, her face contorting in a mask of spoiled rage. "Open this door, you little brat! This is my house now!" Silas heard the commotion and stormed toward the camera. He leaned in so close I could see the broken capillaries in his nose and the sheer, unadulterated spite in his eyes. He didn't see a daughter. He saw an obstacle to the money he felt he was owed. He pulled a heavy metal toolbox from the hallway closet, but he wasn't looking for a screwdriver. He gripped a crowbar, his knuckles white. "Locks can be broken, Mireya," he hissed, his voice a low, terrifying growl that resonated through my London office. "And if I can't sell what's inside this house, I'll make damn sure nobody else can enjoy it either. You think you're smart? You're just a girl with a paycheck and I'm the man who gave you life. I can take it back whenever I want." I watched as he walked out the front door toward his truck. I knew that look. It was the look of a man who had decided that if he couldn't rule the kingdom, he would burn it to the ground. I sat back in my chair, the silence of London pressing in on me. The cold London rain lashed against my office window, a rhythmic drumming that felt like a countdown I couldn't ignore. Across the Atlantic, the Texas sun was dipping low, casting long, predatory shadows over the sanctuary I had spent years perfecting. On my primary monitor, Silas stood in the center of my Austin foyer, his face flushed with a dark, terrifying triumph. He held a thick stack of legal documents up to the camera lens, the white paper gleaming under the recessed lighting. "You've got 24 hours, Mireya," he growled, his voice distorted by the speaker. Digital sign the quitclaim deed I emailed you. Move the management rights to my name, or I'll ensure this place becomes nothing but a memory by tomorrow night. I leaned back, my eyes scanning the legal jargon he was trying to hide behind his thumb. He called them emergency management rights for Celine's party, but my analyst's brain saw through the fog instantly. It was a transfer of ownership, an irrevocable surrender of everything I had built. Character is fate, my grandmother used to say. Watching Silas now, I saw the culmination of a man who never learned to build, only to pillage. His inability to construct his own life had led him to believe he had a divine right to steal mine. It was a tragic realization, seeing the person who should have been my protector become the primary threat to my peace. Even as the pressure mounted, a flickering ember of humanity remained in me. I leaned toward the intercom, keeping my voice steady, devoid of the jagged edges of panic. Dad, listen to me. I know you're stressed about Celine's debutante costs. I will increase your monthly stipend. I will cover the bills, but leave the house now. Walk away and we can settle this like adults. I was offering him a hand while he was holding a knife, trying to show a generosity of spirit that he had never extended to me. But Silas only laughed, a harsh, grating sound that filled my quiet office. To him, my kindness was weakness. To me, it was the final attempt to save his soul before the law took over. The countdown timer on my desk ticked down, each second a tiny hammer blow. In London, my Slack channels were exploding with a major security breach at the firm, requiring every ounce of my professional focus. I was trapped in a glass cage of my own making, suspended between my duty to the global networks I protected and the personal sanctuary being held hostage thousands of miles away. My private line buzzed. It was Myra. I answered, hoping for a voice of reason, but her tone was dripping with that rehearsed manipulative sorrow. Maria. Honey, please, she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. Just give him what he wants. Is a pile of bricks and mortar really more important than your father's heart? He's so worked up I'm afraid he'll have a stroke. Be the good daughter we raised. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words pressing against my chest. A person who uses love as a weapon never truly knew how to love at all. They hadn't raised a daughter. They had groomed a backup plan. The guilt they tried to sew into my skin wouldn't take root this time. I looked at the monitor again. Silas was no longer talking. He was pacing. The psychological siege was in full effect, a suffocating pressure designed to make me break. But they forgot one thing. I was forged in the silence they gave me. I knew how to survive in the dark. Beatrix entered my office, the soft clink of a ceramic cup against a saucer cutting through the tension. She set a steaming cup of Earl Grey on my desk and stood beside me, her gaze fixing on the countdown clock. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't tell me it would be okay. Instead, she placed a firm hand on my shoulder and said, "They can take your walls, Maria. They can burn the wood and shatter the glass, but they cannot take the woman who had the intellect to build them. You are the architect of your own life. The building is just an address." Her wisdom acted as a shield, refocusing my mind. The house was an asset, but my agency was the prize. I spent the next hour in a flurry of cold, calculated movement. I contacted my Texas-based attorney, flagging the quitclaim deed as a document being sought under criminal duress. I filed an affidavit with the county clerk, ensuring that even if they found a way to forge my signature, the law of the land would eventually grind their victory into dust. I wasn't just reacting, I was building a legal fortress around my physical one. I recorded one final message to the house's intercom system, my voice calm, echoing through the halls Silas was currently pacing. I have offered you a home and a life. If you choose to destroy it, you aren't destroying my property. You are destroying the last bridge that connects you to me. Choose carefully. The sun finally set in Texas, turning the sky a bruised purple. I watched the live feed as Silas walked to the back of his truck. The shadows stretched long and distorted across the driveway, making him look like a stranger. A silhouette of a father I had never truly known. He reached into the truck bed and pulled out a heavy, red gasoline can. The bright plastic looked garish and violent against the darkening grass. He didn't look at the camera this time. He just stared at the house, the can swinging by his side with a rhythmic, sickening thud. The smell of gasoline couldn't reach me in London, but as he unscrewed the cap, the sight of it set my entire world on fire. The hum of the London night was a hollow echo against the digital roar of the monitors in my office. Thousands of miles away, the Austin sun beat down with a relentless, harsh glare, illuminating a scene of calculated madness. My father, Silas, didn't just carry a gasoline can. He carried a grudge that had fermented for 30 years. Suddenly, my screens flickered with a high-priority notification. He had started a private live stream titled The Price of Ingratitude. The 4K feed was so crisp I could see the glistening beads of sweat on his forehead and the way his hands trembled as he unscrewed the plastic cap. The visual violation was total. I watched the amber liquid slosh against the plastic, then begin to soak into the hand-carved mahogany of my front door, a door I had worked 3 years of overtime to afford. Watching him, I felt a chilling sense of clarity. There is a fundamental truth about people like Silas. Those who cannot build will always seek to destroy what others have created. He saw my success not as an achievement, but as an insult to his own stagnation. Even in this dark hour, I reached for a shred of the grace my grandmother taught me. I sent a final text to his phone, my fingers steady despite the ice in my veins. "Dad, if you stop now and walk away, I will pay for your therapy. I will help you find a new path. Please don't do this to us." I waited, watching the screen. He glanced at his phone, spat on the porch, and kept pouring. The devastating betrayal was complete. He didn't want a path. He wanted a bonfire. Then the camera angle shifted. My sister, Celine, stepped into the frame. She wasn't cowering in fear or trying to stop him. She was holding her phone up, her face lit by the screen as she recorded a TikTok. She adjusted her rhinestone tiara, smoothing her hair while the fumes of high-octane gasoline filled the Texas afternoon. She looked directly into my security camera and laughed, a sound so brittle and empty it made my skin crawl. "Don't be so dramatic, Mireya," she mocked, her voice thin and shrill. "It's just a house. If you really loved me, you'd let Dad burn this dump so we can get the insurance money. I deserve a debutante ball that people actually talk about." In that moment, the final thread of sisterly affection didn't just break, it evaporated. Blood may make you related, but loyalty and respect are what make you family. Celine had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. I didn't scream, I didn't plead, I simply activated the forensic capture protocol on my server. Every frame of her laughter, every drop of gasoline Silas spilled was being saved with a certified digital timestamp for the Texas District Attorney. I was no longer a sister or a daughter. I was a witness to a felony. It's a strange thing, isn't it? To realize that the people you grew up with are the ones most willing to see you in ashes. Have you ever had to document the destruction of your own heart just to ensure justice followed? I pulled up my professional dashboard and initiated a series of rapid, calculated moves. I didn't waste time on anger. I remembered a teaching I once read. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I decided to stop being the victim and start being the architect of their downfall. First, I contacted my home insurance provider's emergency fraud line. I didn't file a claim, I filed a report of ongoing arson and identity theft. I legally documented that any impending fire would be a criminal act by a third party, effectively preempting Silas's plan to frame me for insurance fraud. Then I patched through to the Austin Police Department's arson task force, providing them with the live link to the stream. I looked at the screen one last time. Silas was reaching into his pocket, his face a mask of unadulterated spite. "From today, Silas, the fire ends with you," I whispered to the empty office. With a single command, I remotely activated the home's high-pressure exterior misting system. Usually meant for cooling the patio during Texas summers, the nozzles now hissed with a violent force, soaking the porch, the gasoline-drenched wood, and Silas himself. The liquid would make it nearly impossible for a small flame to catch. In the distance, the faint wailing siren of an approaching patrol car began to cut through the Texas air. Silas heard the sirens and panics. He didn't flee. Instead, he pulled a flare from his pocket, his eyes locking onto the camera lens with a terrifying, wild grin. He wasn't trying to hide anymore. He wanted me to watch the end. He struck the flare, the magnesium hiss echoing through the audio feed like a death rattle. I sat back, my face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the monitors. I wasn't afraid. I had already secured the evidence, locked the accounts, and alerted the authorities. Silas thought he was lighting a match to my life, but he was only lighting the way for his own handcuffs. The flames raged fiercely in the Texas wind, a blinding, furious flash of lightning striking the damp wood. But the real explosion didn't happen inside the house. It happened in the digital space, where I had begun the process of freezing every asset, every payment, and every credit line that kept the Reynolds family alive. The fire didn't destroy my shelter. It only burned the bridge connecting me to people who were never worthy to cross it. The silence in my London office had become a heavy, suffocating thing. It was 3 a.m., the hour when the world feels thinnest, and my connection to reality was a flickering screen showing the chaos in Texas. I thought the worst was over when the sirens began to wail in the distance of the Austin night. I had secured the house and alerted the authorities, but in the world of predators like Silas, a cornered animal doesn't just retreat. It bites with a venom you didn't know it possessed. A high-priority alert chimed on my console, a jagged sound that cut through the stillness. It wasn't from the police. It was from my insurance provider's enterprise portal. My heart hammered against my ribs as I saw a pre-filed claim notification. Silas hadn't just poured the gasoline. He had used a compromised digital terminal to submit a massive loss claim using a stolen version of my digital signature. My blood ran cold as the live stream audio continued. Silas wasn't running from the approaching police lights. He was standing directly in front of the doorbell camera, shouting with a frantic, theatrical desperation. "Maria, I'm doing what you asked. I'm lighting it now. You can have your insurance money and your lavish London life. Just don't blame me when they ask questions." He was staging a conversation that didn't exist, turning my own security infrastructure into a weapon of character assassination. He was framing me for arson and insurance fraud in real time. Within minutes, a secondary notification hit my professional email. My firm's internal security division had received an anonymous tip about an ongoing fraud investigation involving my personal assets. I felt the floor drop out from under me. My security clearance was flagged, and an immediate suspension notice appeared on my screen. 10 years of building a reputation, of being the most trusted analyst in the sector, was being dismantled by a man who couldn't even manage his own bank account. I sat there, frozen, staring at the suspension notice. Betrayal has a specific flavor. It's metallic, like old pennies, and it coats the back of your throat until you can't breathe. Have you ever worked your entire life to escape a shadow, only to have that shadow reach out and pull you back in just as you reach the light? I felt an overwhelming urge to simply disconnect, to let the fire take the house and my career. But then, a soft hand settled on my shoulder. Beatrix was still there. She hadn't left my side during the long watch. She leaned over, her eyes narrowing as she studied the metadata of the fraudulent claim Silas had submitted. "Maria," she said, her voice a calm, steady anchor in the storm of my panic. "Truth is a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose, and it will defend itself. Look at the timestamps." She pointed to the digital headers. Silas was sloppy. In his rush to frame me, he had logged into the portal using a burner phone that was currently pinging off a tower less than a mile from my Austin home, while my primary login was verified through the corporate VPN here in London. "He wants a ransom, Maria," Beatrix continued, showing me a text message that had just arrived on my phone. "Sign the house over now, and I'll tell them I lied about you ordering the fire. Otherwise, we both go down." I looked at the message, then at the man on the screen who called himself my father. Forgiveness without justice is just an invitation for more abuse. If I gave in now, I wouldn't be saving myself. I would be validating his belief that I could be broken. "I'm not signing anything, Beatrix," I whispered. My voice felt stronger than it had all night. Even as Silas stood there with a flare, I did something he never would. I initiated a direct line to the Austin Fire Department dispatcher. I didn't do it to save the mahogany door or the furniture. I did it because, despite everything, I didn't want him to die in the blaze of his own reckless greed. I wanted him alive to face the judge. I shifted into a state of cold, digital warfare. I used my administrative access to the London servers to trace the IP address of the fraudulent claim. I compiled a packet of evidence, my recorded calls with Beatrix, the VPN logs proving my location, and the live stream footage of Silas staging his conversation. I then contacted a forensic accountant I knew in Texas, a woman who lived for the law of the land. Together, we placed an immediate fraudulent activity lock on the insurance policy. Silas's trap was turning into a cage of his own making. The arson frame-up was now a clear-cut case of felony insurance fraud and identity theft against him. Detective Miller is online too, Beatrix announced. I picked up the headset. My voice was unshaken, a sharp contrast to the sirens and shouting now audible through the Texas feed. Detective, this is Reynolds. I am currently viewing my father, Silas Reynolds, attempting to commit arson and insurance fraud at my property. I have a digital evidence packet ready for your department. Miss Reynolds, we're on site now, the detective's voice crackled. He's claiming you're the one behind this. I am not a victim, detective, I replied, staring at Silas as the police officers moved in with their weapons drawn. I am the witness. My family chose the fire. I am simply choosing the firemen. The evidence I'm sending will speak for itself. I watched as the red and blue lights saturated the Austin driveway, reflecting off the pools of water from the misting system I had activated earlier. Silas was being tackled to the ground, the flare extinguished in the wet grass. I felt a hollow sense of victory, a weary relief that the immediate danger had passed. But as I prepared to close the feed, a sharp, insistent notification chime echoed through my office. A new window popped up on my laptop. It was an automated alert from the Texas State Registry. Silas had filed a power of attorney document 4 years ago, a forged instrument that I had never been notified of. It was set to go active the moment any legal incapacity or crisis was flagged against my name. And because of the fraud investigation he had just triggered, that document was moving into the pending approval phase. If it passed, Silas would have legal control over my Texas assets, including the house, even from a jail cell. I stared at the pending status, my pulse thudding in my ears. Silas had one more card to play, a forged legacy of control that was about to go live. The sirens in Austin were deafening, but the real silence was falling over my heart as I realized the battle was moving from the porch to the boardroom. I wasn't done yet. I stood up, my eyes fixed on the screen, already preparing to pull the plug on the one thing they valued more than the house: the debutante ball. I wasn't just defending a house anymore. I was dismantling a delusion. My family had spent years using my achievements as their communal credit line, and it was time to close the account. I stood up, my eyes fixed on the secondary monitor where the live schedule for the Austin debutante ball was pinned. They wanted a show. I was about to give them a premiere they would never forget. The grand ballroom of the Driscoll Hotel was a sea of white roses, silk drapes, and the clinking of crystal. A scene of curated high society funded entirely by the piece they had stolen from me. On the screen, Celine was center stage, glowing under the spotlight in a gown that cost more than a mid-size sedan. She was basking in the hollow adoration of guests who only knew the version of the Reynolds family that Silas had carefully manufactured. It was a masterpiece of false glory. Watching her twirl, I felt a sharp, icy pang of vindication. I hadn't just been forgotten. I had been used as the foundation for a life she didn't earn. With a series of precise keystrokes, I bypassed the venue's local multimedia server. This was the digital guillotine, the celebratory tribute video of Celine's life, meant to show her childhood milestones, suddenly flickered and died. In its place, the massive ballroom screens erupted with the raw, unedited security footage from just hours ago. The high society crowd gasped as the 4K feed showed Silas drenching my front door in gasoline, his face contorted in a mask of greed. The room went deathly silent as Celine's mockery echoed through the ballroom speakers, crystal clear and undeniable. "It's just a house. Get the insurance money for my ball." Light is truly the best disinfectant for a house built on shadows. I didn't need to scream or plead. I simply presented the evidence like the professional analyst I am. My character was defined by the truth on that screen, while theirs was exposed as a hollow performance. As the video reached its climax, I initiated the Absolute Zero protocol. From my terminal in London, I revoked every payment authorization tied to the event. I flagged the corporate and personal credit cards Silas had been using for unauthorized fraudulent use. I watched through a secondary feed as the hotel manager, a man who had been smiling moments ago, approached Silas with a grim expression and a tablet in hand. The financial freeze was instantaneous. Reputation is what others think of you, but integrity is who you are when the lights go out. Silas's face turned a sickly shade of gray as he realized the fountain of wealth had finally run dry. The public humiliation was a slow-motion wreck. The band, sensing the shift in the room's oxygen, trailed off into a discordant silence. Celine's tiara seemed to tarnish under the harsh ballroom lights as the catering staff, acting on the manager's orders, began clearing the tables mid-course. The Golden Sister was left standing alone on a dark stage in a room full of people who were suddenly very interested in their shoes. My private line buzzed. It was Myra. Her voice a shrill, hysterical scream. "Mireya, how could you? You've ruined our reputation in this city. We'll never show our faces again." "Reputation is a fragile thing, Mom," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "You didn't ruin it today. You ruined it when you decided a party was worth more than your daughter's life." Even as I spoke, I felt a flicker of the humanity I had tried so hard to preserve. I informed her that I had already authorized a direct, private payment to the hotel staff for their tips and basic labor. I wouldn't allow the innocent workers, the waitstaff, the janitors, the people who actually earn their living, to be punished for the Reynolds' greed. I was cutting the family off, but I wasn't becoming a monster to do it. Then came the hand of the law. The ballroom's ornate doors swung open, but it wasn't a late arrival. The Austin Police Arson Task Force marched in, their blue and red lights flashing against the hotel's polished marble floors. Silas was handcuffed in front of his peers, his desperate power of attorney fraud now a matter of public record for every influential person in the city to see. I watched my father being led away, his head bowed in a way I had never seen. I felt no joy, no rush of adrenaline. I only felt a profound, heavy relief of the soul. The burden of carrying their lies, of being the invisible pillar holding up their house of cards, was finally over. Looking back now, I realize you cannot save people from a fire they keep lighting themselves. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let them face the cold. I sat in my London office, the silence now peaceful, and watched the rain wash the grime from the streets below. I initiated the final settlement protocol, a legal sequence that would begin the process of selling every Texas asset and erasing my footprint from that state forever. I was finally claiming my own horizon. Have you ever had to watch a bridge burn just to realize the smoke was the only thing blocking your view of the future? A final chime echoed in the room, an encrypted alert from my home security system in Austin. Celine hadn't stayed at the hotel to face the fallout. The GPS on her phone, still linked to my family's share plan she hadn't realized I'd monitored, showed her approaching my house. She had a stolen master key and a mind fueled by a frantic, unhinged plan for revenge. I didn't panic. I simply adjusted my screen. Celine was heading toward a sanctuary she thought she knew, unaware that I had already turned it into a fortress she could never penetrate. The tires of Celine's car screamed against the gravel of my Austin driveway, a frantic, desperate sound that signaled the end of an era. I sat on my rooftop garden in London, the crisp autumn air of 2026 chilling my skin, watching through the high-fidelity lenses of my security system. Celine lunged toward the front door, her face a mask of unhinged fury, surely expecting to find the luxurious sanctuary she had helped Silas violate. She didn't know that the fortress wasn't just made of digital locks and steel bolts. It was made of the absolute unshakable silence of a bridge that had finally finished burning. When she reached the porch, she didn't find a barricade. She found a house that was hollow, stripped of every piece of furniture Silas had tried to sell, every memory they had tried to pawn. Standing there, waiting for her, was not me, but a legal courier in a sharp suit holding a manila envelope. Celine froze, her hand hovering over a master key that had already been deactivated. I pressed the intercom button, my voice projecting into the Texas afternoon. It was devoid of the jagged edges of anger. Instead, it was filled with a heavy, parental sort of sadness, the kind you feel when you realize you are watching someone drown because they refuse to let go of the anchor. "The locks aren't the only thing that changed, Celine," I said, my voice steady through the porch speakers. She jumped, spinning around to snarl at the camera lens. "You destroyed everything! Dad is in jail because of you!" I let her scream. I let the poison of her entitlement spill out until she ran out of breath. "I didn't destroy this family," I replied quietly. "I simply stopped pretending to be the one holding it together. You have two choices today. Inside that envelope is a one-way ticket to a residential rehabilitation and career counseling program in Vermont. It is paid for in full. It is your path to a life you actually earn. The second choice is a permanent restraining order. The courier has both. Choose who you want to be, because the person you were is no longer welcome here. I watched her stare at the envelope. I understood then a hard philosophy of growth. You cannot wake someone who is pretending to be asleep. My kindness had been a weakness to them for so long, but now it had been forged into an iron boundary. I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. To protect my own peace, I had to stop being the cushion for their falls. Celine didn't take the ticket. She threw the envelope into the dirt and stormed back to her car. I watched her drive away, and for the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel the urge to chase her. I just felt the light, terrifying weight of absolute freedom. By the next morning, the legal severance was absolute. My attorney in Austin confirmed the final sale of the property. I didn't sell it to a developer or a flipper. I sold it to a young family with 2 daughters who looked at the hand-carved mahogany door with wide, hopeful eyes. A family that would fill those halls with a different kind of history. The equity from the sale didn't go into my personal savings. I had enough. Instead, I worked with my legal counsel to establish a basic needs trust for Myra. Following the strict guidelines of U.S. elder care law, the funds were placed under the control of a third-party fiduciary. My mother called me later that evening, her voice small and stripped of its usual manipulative edge. "Maria, how will I live? Silas is facing years, and I have nothing." I listened to her breathe on the other end of the line. I didn't feel the old familiar guilt. "You have a roof, Mom," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "The trust will pay your rent and your health care directly. It will provide for your groceries, but it will never fund Celine's whims. It will never pay for another debutante ball or a designer dress. I am not abandoning you. I am releasing you to the consequences of your own actions. True love does not fund self-destruction. I've spent my life being your bank, but I'd rather be your daughter, even if that has to happen from a distance." The silence on her end was the sound of a woman realizing she had lost her power over me. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say she was sorry. She just hung up. It hurt, a dull throb in the center of my chest, but it was a clean pain. It was the pain of a wound finally beginning to close. I had provided the legal minimum out of respect for the parents they were before greed took the wheel, but the emotional ATM was permanently out of service. I was no longer a resource to be managed. I was a sovereign woman. I stood up from my stone bench and walked to the edge of the rooftop garden. London stretched out before me, a tapestry of lights and ancient stone. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged to the city because I finally belonged to myself. I hadn't just survived the Reynolds family drama. I had outgrown the version of me that needed them to see me. I took the remaining equity from the Austin house and signed the papers to launch the Maria Reynolds Visibility Scholarship. It was a legacy built from the ashes of their betrayal. A fund dedicated to first-generation tech students, specifically youngest daughters who had been overlooked and undervalued. I pulled my grandmother's old, worn-out photograph from my wallet. The edges were frayed, but her eyes were still sharp, still knowing. I placed it on the center of my new desk, right next to my cybersecurity award. I didn't need to hide it behind winter coats or keep it secret anymore. I smiled at her, and I felt her smiling back. I was finally completely visible. Not because of a trophy or a title, but because I had reclaimed my own name. The sun began to set over the Thames, painting the sky in shades of gold and deep violet. I thought about the journey from that scratched oak table in Texas to this height in London. The most powerful thing you can ever do is become the person you were meant to be before the world, and your family told you who you were. It is a quiet power, a steady flame that doesn't need to burn anyone else to stay lit. I looked toward the horizon, watching the lights of the planes descending into Heathrow, each one carrying a story, a struggle, a hope. Sometimes the hardest bridge to burn is the one that leads to the people who share your blood. It feels like you're losing a part of yourself, but really, you're just making room for the person you were always supposed to be. But I want to know your thoughts. At what point does family stop being a reason and start being an excuse? Have you ever had to choose your own survival over the expectations of people who claim to love you? I know many of you have lived through your own fires. Tell me your story in the comments below. I'll be sitting here in the quiet, and I promise I'll be reading every single one.